Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels, where my guest today is Howard Chaykin, who I don't even know how to introduce you. You've been in the business for as long as almost anybody we've talked to. I think Paul Levitz and Dennis Kitchen are the only two people that we've talked to that have been doing this for as long as you have.
Well,
Um,
my first credit is in 1971,
yeah,
uh, but I've been working in the business as an assistant and as a gopher and as a background man and as a cleanup guy for 3 years before that. So I dated
yeah,
back to late '68.
yeah. Well, and you've got a tie to our you were assistant to Wally Wood,
Yes,
where we take our
I,
title from.
I penciled a strip that he was doing for the Overseas Weekly called Shattuck.
Which I
Uh,
love.
what he was doing these marginally smutty newspaper strips
Yep.
for a PX available only newspaper, and I was completely unup to the job. I had no skill set whatsoever. I was completely inappropriate, but I had a great time being there because it taught
Right.
me a series of valuable lessons and introduced me to someone who became a lifelong friend.
Well, that's good.
I don't mean Woody either.
Well, then who did it introduce you
Jack Abel.
to? Okay. Very cool.
I was planted in a studio space. Woody had a studio in Valley Stream, Long Island. Where are you, by the way?
I'm in Chicagoland.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
What part of Chicago?
Round Lake, so up
Oh,
by
okay.
Gurnee, almost
Yeah, okay.
halfway
I know.
between
Yeah,
Chicago and Milwaukee.
I know the drill. Okay. I went to
That's
school.
right.
I mean, yeah, I have a Chicago part of my story as well.
I
But
know you do.
Woody had a story at a studio in Valley Stream, above one of the best German delis ever. I mean, I can still have bad breath from the liverwurst I ate for lunch there. And Woody installed me in a studio that he was renting space out to Jack Abel and Sid Shores. And within a day, I realized that Jack's primary function on a daily basis was just to fuck with Sid Shores. And within a day of that, Jack realized he had a henchman and an accomplice in me.
Nice.
And I spent most of the time that I was working for Woody fucking with Sid Shores as well. So it was good. It was
That
good.
works. That works. It sounds fun.
Uh-huh.
Um, See, most of the time when I wind up throwing myself into somebody's work, I wind up with a line of questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And this time I didn't, because your work, I love every second of it and can never quite put my finger on why. You know, in our email exchanges, you thanked me for not calling you a curmudgeon, and I don't think you are. In fact, I think that it's easy to read your work and take it as somebody who's deeply cynical, but but I don't read it that way at all. I read
You
it as
mistake, you
somebody.
mistake, you mistake skepticism for cynicism.
Well,
Uh,
actually, that's where I was about to go. I was about to say I read it as somebody who has a healthy dose of skepticism, but loves what they're writing about, who
exactly.
understands that people are flawed. So all of your characters have warts, but they all have, for lack of a better term right now, shiny spots as well. Um, and it's just very human, whether you're writing
Well,
about comics or TV or Old West or uh, post-apocalyptic future in American Flag, and I really,
I have I'm a comic book man, word one. I mean, I'm
right.
everything I am, I owe to comic books. As I've said more than once, I've told the story a number of times. I discovered comic books when I was 4 years old, the summer of 1955. Coincidentally, the same year that the Comics Code Authority completely fucked up comic books,
Yep.
and I was completely enraptured by this idea, these things that existed, these objects, and I made a commitment at that point that was all I would ever do. And every single decision I've made professionally as an adult has been to enable me to make comic books.
Okay.
And again, that's I recognize the fact that the kind of comic books that I like, kind of work that I do, is not something that has an audience of any real size or scope.
Right.
Simply because I'm not interested in the genres that are most prevalent in comic books, the super dragon, laser monster, mutant stuff.
Right. Right.
I was obsessed with it, and I guess I'm wrong to expect and hope that someone would outgrow with me. Hold on a second. Yes.
Your water's mixing in your house. I'm gonna need to go ahead and just kill it.
Done.
In the house.
Done.
Okay. Cool.
How long will that be?
An hour or so.
Yeah, go with that. Yeah, I'm good. We're having a water heater worked on, as you can see. Real life intrudes.
Real life.
Yeah. But you go on.
Well, I was gonna say I think superheroes remain, but I think comics have also matured and gone all over the place. You fit in better than you sometimes think.
Yeah, but
I'm annoyed by how hard it is to find it.
I'm not making a living. I mean, there's no.
Right.
I have no.
That's fair.
No one buys my stuff. I have more Facebook friends than I sell monthly copies of books, and I understand the fact that I'm the architect of my own adversity. I mean, I've created this issue. It's not like I blame anyone but myself. Trust me.
Right.
I'm as guilty. I'm guilty for why I am where I am. Trust me.
But I agree with you that I wish more people read it.
Oh, me too. Look, I'd love to be loved more than I am, but I'm not, and I live with that as well.
No, I understand. I'm just I see the wheels are turning. Sometimes the wheels turn out loud. I'm sorry, Howard. I'm not as prepared as I wanted to be, just because again, you're so. I mean, I'm a teacher, and one of the reasons
what do you teach?
I'm a special ed teacher.
Okay.
One of the reasons I love comics is they're a universal medium for storytelling, for conveying information. Because of that mix of words and verbal, they engage both sides of your brain. If you're like my wife only thinks in pictures, I only think in words. I can't conjure a picture in my brain to save my life. And the reason that comics can work for both of us is when she's having trouble putting the words to what she's seeing, it helps her out. And when I'm having trouble putting the word or the pictures to what I'm seeing, it helps me out. Comics as a medium offers so much. And I guess that's where I want to go. What made you?
You're preaching to the choir. I mean,
I know.
I talk read from comic books. I mean, by the time I was 5 and I entered first grade, because I was born late in the year, so I started first grade early. I was reading on a 4th grade level.
All because of comics.
Because of comics. Because I may not have been able to pronounce indestructible and invulnerable, but I knew their context because of the relationship they had tangentially with pictures.
Right.
And so, you parse. And as I've said more than once, my parents never identified the impact that comics had on me as from an educational perspective. They thought I was some sort of genetic anomaly. Yeah. And they died having very, very little idea what I did do for a living. And
there's actually data at this point that comics use a wider and
absolutely
and like
a more evolved vocabulary,
higher level vocabulary than most prose does. Because they have to. I mean, a good comic is going to have an economy of words, so you got to make those words matter. But take me back. What? And as much in terms of like how you connected versus just the nuts and bolts like story. What caught you about comics? How did you catch the bug? What made you go, oh my God, this is what we both know it is, which is like just the best medium for almost anything.
I don't agree with that, but
yeah.
I like everybody who discovers comics, the first thing you learn, you respond to is the content. The form is irrelevant. I mean, the form has no context for anybody who's new. What you're reading Superman, you're reading Batman, you're reading monster stories, you're reading Donald Duck, you're reading Bugs Bunny. And I love the idea. I mean, and I couldn't articulate this because I was 4 years old, for fuck's sake.
Right.
But the relationship of image to text really appealed to me enormously. And the idea that there was a narrative context. I'm a not particularly nice Jewish boy from New York, and one of the tropes of my sort of people is narrative. We tell stories, and the Passover Seder is about a story, the telling of the story of the escape from Egypt, and Hanukkah is a story of the capture, the surrounded in Masada, and so I grew up with storytelling. My parents were both bullshit artists, and and I grew up in a bullshit artist environment, and the sense of narrative is an imperative, and the accompaniment of narrative with pictures was really phenomenal. I had a long conversation yesterday, oddly enough, at lunch with a colleague of mine. I had lunch with two colleagues, one a former assistant, one a former editor, about Will Eisner's PS for the preventive maintenance monthly stuff.
Fantastic stuff.
I don't agree, and
yeah,
the reason I'll elaborate. I mean, they're beautiful, but I don't think they do the job they claim to do. I think the job they claim to do is actually done more effectively by a guy named Roy Doty, Roy Doty, who was one of the dullest cartoonists I've ever seen, who did a feature either in Popular Science or Popular Mechanics, I forget which, called Wordless Workshop, which were 12, or I forget number of images per page, per double page, in which when you were finished, you could build a birdhouse or a wireless set. And the thing about the preventive maintenance monthly stuff is that it's beautiful to look at, but it doesn't incorporate the language of comics in doing the job of telling. It's basically a manual, a technical manual with pictures, as opposed to a technical manual that uses pictures to support the technical manualness of it. Okay.
I'm looking at Wordless Workshop right now. This is fantastic.
Okay. This is what everybody thinks Eisner was doing there. Okay.
No, this is better.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
Never saw this before, did you?
I hadn't.
See? And again, he's an incredibly
but I'm now looking at the book of it available. Unfortunately, the paperback's $105.99.
No, it's when it came out. It was like they were giving it away because nobody wanted it. Because it's. But I'm not trying to compare Eisner's skill set with Roy Doty's skill set. What I'm saying is that what Doty did is what people think Eisner did.
Right.
What Eisner was not using the comics medium to elaborate on technology, rather on maintenance. Rather, he was doing an illustrated technical manual.
Right. That I agree with.
And to a certain extent, when you look at comic books, my dogs.
Eddie likes to join the podcast.
I can dig it. I have spent my serious career really didn't get started until I was like 30. My first 10 years of my career was just a joke. It was a complete jerk off. But I've spent those years since then trying to find ways to convey, to create pages and panels that are endowed with narrative value. That narrative value is an elusive and subjective idea. But I mean, I could not do what Doty did. I think you need a whereas I could see someone working in an Hergé approach doing what Doty did. It's when I saw the preventive maintenance monthly stuff, I was expecting it to be precisely what the Doty work is, and it isn't. But we've gone off on a diversion, a tangent.
That's what we do on this show.
Away from tangents. Let's get back to the main course here. Let's move it on.
But that means we have to know what the main course is.
Mm-hmm.
I've reread a lot of your stuff in the last few days, but probably I enjoyed the most rereading Hey Kids comics.
Thank you. I'm rather fond of it myself.
it's fantastic. I'm particularly appreciative, and I've actually learned a lot more about comics history in the time since the first volume came out. So I rereading it, I looked at it differently. A friend of mine has produced a couple of plays in Chicago, at the City Lit Theater over the last couple of years. One was about Bob Kane and Bill Finger,
Mhm.
and the one this year was about um really was about Bill Gaines and the Wortham hearings and Matt Baker and Janice Ballou.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Next year will be House of Ideas. He's going to do Stan and Jack, and he really tries to get into the psychology of the characters, what they went with. But so reading it, knowing more of those stories from having known Mark and talked to him about his plays and his research and whatnot, it I had to go back and it's so hard not to read it and go, okay, who's this supposed to be? And I enjoy it more when and tell me if I'm wrong, when I'm like, okay, lots of these stories are specific people, but they're not direct analogs most of the
Well,
time.
some of them are obviously.
Right.
There are obviously some direct analogs,
Yeah.
but there are also at least there are far more conflations.
Right.
I might also add that I've said more than once that it never really happened. A lot of it didn't happen, but it's still all true.
Right.
Um, I People have been surprised by volume 3 in what they regard as my overgenerous treatment of a character who's an avatar of a former editor-in-chief at Marvel Comics. I'm convinced that if some of my colleagues read volume 3, there are people who will never speak to me again. But that's. I mean, I live in a
I mean,
small
I
town.
hope not.
I don't really care. I will. As Gloria Gaynor said, I will survive.
Yeah.
I always like to quote Gloria Gaynor at least once a day.
It's absolutely great that you don't care, but one of the things that I've enjoyed about comics in the time that I've been podcasting is that and and I wonder if it's changed or if you're showing us your skeptical view, um and in some ways the more entertaining view in Hey Kids Comics, but there is a sense of community. There is a sense of um rising tides raise all ships.
No,
Um,
no,
no, you don't buy it.
no. I believe that what you have is a series of collegial relationships, some friendships, based on mutual admiration and in some cases mutual disgust. Comics always derives its talent pool from fans. No one decides on to do comics having not been inoculated by comics in the first place. It is an inoculated process. People who tell me otherwise are lying.
Though sometimes they're inoculated late.
Maybe, but the inoculation is real. At any rate, when I came along, we were the third generation. My generation was the third generation. The first were the guys who were born in the 20s, who did comics when they were children, while the able-bodied men were getting killed. The second generation, the guys who were born in 38 to 40, Roy Thomas, Tom Palmer, Neil Adams, Jim Steranko, a couple of those older men, who made a mini generation. They were the guys who really created fandom. I mean, the first fandom was really seriously the fan addicts at EC.
Right.
And then my generation came along. And my generation came along with, for the most part, with very few exceptions, no illusions about what to expect of our treatment. I had a long chat with Greg Goldstein. He used to be the publisher at IDW. He was a good friend. We were talking after the second trade came out, the second volume. And I said that there's a quantum difference in the bitterness factor that exists between the first generation and my generation, the third. And he said, yeah, because you guys, it's like he paraphrased what I often said, which is what Super Chicken said to Fred. You knew the job was dangerous when you took it. And I think that's an extraordinarily and important idea. One of the things that I find most compelling about those two quotes, when Jack Kirby, comics will break your heart, kid. and Woody had the same sort of sensibility. The unspoken part of that is narcissism, which is that I know everybody else got fucked, but I'm so good I will not be fucked. And everybody gets fucked. It's just the way it is. I mean, it's a business of at one point in volume 1 or 2, I have my Ted Whitman say, comics is basically Jews fucking over other Jews.
Right.
And that comes through in Michael Chabon's Cavalier and Clay.
Yep.
It certainly comes true in Men of Tomorrow.
Yep.
And it wasn't until the Kefauver Commission that we had the opportunity to be fucked over by wasps. But David Haju's 10-Cent Plague,
right,
to elaborate detail about how the frat boys of the NCS basically dismiss comic books as the work of unsavory figures. Somebody posted a couple of days ago some stuff that Johnny Craig did for Erie, and Craig is just an extraordinary talent who Joe Orlando always said was browbeaten out of the comic book business by his wife because she was ashamed of the fact that his work was being compared to pornographers. I understood that.
Right.
My generation, we were, with very few exceptions, we were all stoners, with a very, very few specific exceptions. We all drank together. We ate together. We were very collegial. We were very committed to that collegiality. And we made a commitment not to be like the old guys who all hated each other's guts because they were competing for smaller and smaller pies. And some of us have maintained friendships. I mean, I'm still pals with Walter. Walter and I spoke to Walter a couple of days ago.
Right.
But we are detachedly collegial. And the problem has been that from fandom bought into Stan's bullshit line about us being all a bunch of comic book loving guys. And, the problem is exacerbated by the fact that we have men who made a vocation of our avocation. We have taken our hobby and figured out a way to make at least a living out of it. And just because we love to do the work we do doesn't mean it doesn't become work.
Right.
And the fans' understanding of comics is once a week on Wednesday at the comic book shop. For me, it's every fucking morning on my desk. And believe me, I'm grateful to have the skill set to continue to do work, but it's still work.
Right.
And it's work it's incredibly frivolous, that is ultimately pointless, but is difficult to do well.
I disagree that it's ultimately pointless.
Okay. You're welcome to disagree all your life.
I mean, if it's ultimately pointless, all art is ultimately pointless.
Right. It is. It has, first of all, I don't consider comics art. I consider comics a craft. And I don't think that diminishes its value in any way.
My pushback, because I'm married to an art teacher, would be painting is a craft, sculpting is a craft.
Yes,
what art isn't a craft?
I don't know.
Okay. That's fair.
I don't know. Who can say?
I think the difference in general between people who actually become artists and people who occasionally do art is learning the craft.
I think people who call themselves artists are in danger of succumbing to their own narcissism.
Probably.
And I think that, I'm a comic book man. I'm a cartoonist, which means that I write and draw my own stuff. I will occasionally write for other people. I will occasionally draw for other people. But no matter what I do, everything is underpinned by narrative. Right. It all gets back to that bullshit artist, that telling stories. And I'm one of the rare men on the mainstream comics who's on reasonably good terms with Gary Groth. Okay, Gary and I've known Gary since he was 15. We argue, we disagree, but we still talk cordially, which astonishes many of my colleagues who would gladly see him burned at the stake like a witch. And Gary, because he's not an actual working professional, but an enthusiast in his own particular way, diminishes the idea of the value of storytelling. And I believe that's at the peril of the work, because the capacity to convey narrative visually is innate to the value of the material. And one of the reasons why I have a real aversion to the current spate of rampant amateurism that is extant in comics, both in mainstream and the independent market, whatever that market may be, is that it disavows and dismisses decades of learning of how to create images and pages endowed with narrative value. And again, that's a subjective idea,
Right.
but it remains an idea. I do a lecture called The Paradigm,
Okay.
which I'm going to be delivering in Albuquerque in 3 weeks. And I did it in UCLA a month and a half ago. And one of the things I talk about there is, and that lecture began at Marvel in 2008. I did it twice a year at Marvel for about 6-7 years. And one of the things I understood, I came to realize, was that I was surrounded by a talent pool who could draw the figure reasonably well, but didn't have the slightest idea of what picture making means.
Right.
That picture making is how you organize shapes and images inside a frame. That simply putting 4 lines around a drawing does not make it a picture.
Right.
Picture has context. Mm-hmm. And that context in the context of comic books is narrative value. It's the way you frame and shape and structure material. A friend of mine, a couple of years ago, posted a series of screenshots from Hitchcock pictures saying nobody does this anymore, meaning nobody in filmmaking does this anymore. And I said, I do it every day.
Right.
You know, I use foreground images to frame midground images. And one of the things I talk about in this lecture is the idea that balance is not symmetry, and that the inverse is also true. Symmetry is not balance.
Definitely.
And that symmetry is a cheap trick deployed by people using quasi-religious imagery to achieve superpowered imagery. That symmetry belongs in the church. And the overuse of symmetry in comics demonstrates a limited grasp and a limited imagination. There you go.
Makes sense to me. Though I mean, I've been on record a number of times calling this Platinum Age of comics. I think there are more comics that are truly good and worth reading now than there have ever been. Does that mean that they're all good? No. But I mean, without naming names, because it's just not what I do. I mean, what feels amateur to you?
There's a in the realm of that phrase, graphic novels, a portmanteau I reject out of hand. There's this assumption that comic books is a natural act, that making comics is something that anybody could do. It's a completely democratic process. Okay. That there is no syntax, there's no vocabulary, there's no language, which is ridiculous. I also feel that in mainstream comics, there's a peculiar metric going on in that writers are the alpha in mainstream comic books for a number of reasons, none of which I'll litanize. I've litanized elsewhere in several Substack. But what's fascinating about that is that comic books, for most comic book writers, can be a transient place. That comic book writers can use comics as a means to establish a reputation, to find an audience, and move on to television or film. Whereas comic book artists, because they are more often than not delivering material that is invested almost entirely with tropes of mainstream comics, are stuck. Consider how few mainstream comics are ever tapped to do imagery outside of mainstream comics to depict what mainstream comics represent. They are trapped by the tropes they have embraced. Their skill sets are such that they're aimed solely at doing the work they've grown up loving to do, and they've never outgrown that love. Right. And that the professionals among them wake up one morning and find out they've aged out, and they're shocked and dismayed and incapable of getting around it. And they frequently politicize this experience. I aged out at Marvel and DC both about over a decade ago.
Right.
I do the kind of work that they're not interested in, and frankly, the editors are all younger. They're closer in age to my grandchildren than they are to my kids.
Right.
And nobody wants to yell at an old person.
Right.
They don't like to yell at they don't like to yell at the guy that reminds them of their parents, let alone their grandparents. And neither company, neither Marvel nor DC, nor any of the other that attempt to compete with them, have art directors on staff. They have every single aspect of their editorial criticism. The sieve through which they signal their editorial is literary as opposed to visual. You taking your pulse?
No, I just had a message pop up.
Anybody I know?
What?
Anybody I know?
No.
Okay.
Not this time.
Okay, good.
If anybody pops in, I'll let them know.
There's no one at any of those companies who has a grasp of the visual narrative sensibility. It's all very literal, very literary rather. So that the visual nature of comics, which is the implicit nature of comics, is subsumed in the name of the literary. This is exacerbated by in the independent stuff, where guys with no skill sets whatsoever decide one morning, it's Sunday, I think I'll become a graphic novelist today, and do so. And there's this. It's comparable to those second and third wives of Hollywood executives who wake up in the morning after the honeymoon to discover they're all of a sudden interior decorators. I feel that this sensibility completely dismisses the 50 plus years that I've spent trying as hard as possible to get better at what I do.
See, I mean, and some of this is as I know many of them and their friends, and some of it is just I have a broad range of what I like, but so many of the people that I know that write graphic novels that work at the big two or don't work at the big two are just absolute geeks for craft and learning the language. And, almost anybody who's really good at this will talk a lot about the craft and the learning of the language. They don't do things on accident for the most part. I agree that one of the things that
I will say here, the work does not demonstrate that in any way.
I mean, I can't agree with you. I mean, I just read Nate Powell's adaptation of Lies My Teacher Told Me. And the way he crafts his narrative is masterful. He takes a nonfiction book and a good nonfiction book, but puts it on set a greater level. I mean, one of the things that comics can do when you're doing nonfiction is it can bring different ideas to the page at the same time in a way that's very difficult to do with prose. Joel Christian Gill adapted Ibarrex Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning recently, and one of the things that he does regularly is he has why am I drawing a blank? Angela Davis pop up very earlier with just kind of the smirk and the oh, this seems familiar.
Okay. Look, I mean, you're talking about books I've not seen.
That's true.
I'm willing to say that, maybe you're right. But my experience has been that, with this whole comics broke me stuff over the past year or so, there's a measure of entitlement built into the expectations of comics. And like I said, the job was dangerous when you took it.
Yeah.
So I have a very difficult time with the concept of expectations.
Right.
I believe that expectations are resentments in training. And I haven't in any way, when I aged out of Marvel and DC, for example, I got over my annoyance very rapidly. Because I come to understand that my value is not dictated by the assumptions of others.
Right.
That my self-esteem does not derive from the attention of others. And I recognize the fact that no matter how good I know I am, that particular objective, that is a subjective good.
Right.
That the good defined by the editorial departments and by the enthusiasts don't necessarily bear any resemblance to my identification of good.
That's
And
fair.
I work in a business in which favorite and best are frequently misused in each other's context.
That I totally agree with, though I also question whether anybody can say anything about best with few exceptions.
I can, because I care to. I mean,
Well, yeah.
I mean, I bring. Look, I mean,
let me rephrase, because I absolutely will. I've fallen away from using best, but when I talk about works, I absolutely differentiate between things that are my favorite and things that I think are more impactful or um more medium defining. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I was visiting. My kids live up north, okay, and I was visiting, and one of the my family has little or no idea what I do for a living. They know I do comic, but they're just
Right.
They don't know. They really they don't they can't quite what I mean when I started dating my daughter's mother, she's my stepdaughter. And this is 30 years ago, she was working at Skywalker, and that's where she met her husband. And she told her fellow coworkers that her mother was dating a comic book artist, and they said, "Okay." And she gave them my name, and they all stepped back, like whoa, like whoa, knowing, And so she has no real idea what my footprint is. While I was visiting, the two of us were sitting there, and she went on. She asked me whether I was ever on TikTok, and I said no. She said, "You're all over TikTok." She said. Really? They had an interview for me from '84, and they had this woman who was literally demanding that I be burned at the stake as a witch. It was fantastic. And she said, "Why do these people hate you so much?" And I try to explain, and I realized that explaining the level of passion that exists in our business to people who are civilians in this context is an impossible task.
That's
really.
Though, I mean, sometimes you can find the analogy. I know I'm trying to remember which interview I booked, but I wound up booking an interview that had me incredibly psyched, and I didn't know how to explain it to my coworkers. And suddenly I went, "Wait a minute. Um, you're a big music fan. Imagine you just booked Mick Jagger."
Okay.
And they're like, "Okay, I get it now."
Right.
So it's not that they have no experience with it. You just sometimes have to put it in a different context. Too often lately, rabid political experience is the only way to put it. But also, I'm the way I describe myself to my dad the other day was my two superpowers. If we're going to consider them superpowers, they might also be my two greatest faults. Is I'm radically vulnerable and I'm a rational optimist. So the way I'm going to push back on you here, particularly looking at the comics broke me. You in Hey Kids Comics very much separated the executives from the workers in your intro in your character pages. Comics broke me came about when a well-regarded artist who'd never actually made it and didn't care pretty literally worked himself to death. So most of the people who initially started that were more than anything just mourning a friend. Um, when it started getting covered by the press, and particularly the press owned by,
Yes, that guy. We do not
well,
say we do not say his name because it means we'll be sucked into hell.
I wasn't even going to go there, but that too. But there's also comics press at this point that's owned by bigger corporations. As with so much from corporate press, there was the management spin on it. Um, I mean, I had interviews with people around then that weren't the interviews were set up before the comics broke me started, but it would come up, and it wasn't that it broke them in that they were going to leave comics. It wasn't that they had had any rose-colored glasses about what getting into comics is. In fact, most of the people that I talk to have actually been successful in comics. I talked to Tom King, and every day he's amazed that he actually makes like a living at comics. Um,
I think that amazement might be just a tad performative. I'm
it
just
might be, but I've
I mean,
also
I mean I like Tom fine. Tom's a good guy. He's a really good guy.
right, but
But
I mean,
I think he's overstating his amazement just
possibly.
Okay.
I mean, he seems like I've got mental health issues, so I can see them in other people as well,
I
and
don't
we've actually talked about it. So I mean,
I have moral health issues.
he's
And
he's got imposter syndrome.
okay. All right. Okay. All right.
And also there's nobody that's more appreciative of his artists. He bends over backwards to talk about what his artists do.
Oh, I agree. And,
Um,
and no, I'm not saying otherwise. But I mean, I
and
don't
for
want to
that matter, that
go on a tangent about Tom King either, because
no, no, I don't. Yeah, no, no. Well, but I mean, I didn't need it to be about Tom because you also talked about, yes, it's become writer centric, and I don't know. I think about that a lot because you're right. The artist, in so many ways, is more important. The artist is doing so much of the heavy lifting, and the artist can go storyboard, the artist can do ad work, but the
not
artist,
really, not really. The many of the most comic book talent is really trained to do comic books. Very few of them have the skill set to apply to boarding and or advertising. Advertising as it existed when I was in my 20s doesn't exist anymore.
right?
Uh, and the the dirty little secret is that frankly writers are smarter than artists, and they've managed to create an environment in which their skill sets are more highly valued.
There is an element of that. I also think, and I always, every step down the line, you can kill a comic. A comic that has a good story and bad art winds up being a bad comic. A comic with a good story and good pencils and bad inks can wind up being a bad comic. Um, every step down the line, it's harder to make a comic. I mean, with some exceptions, Kirby did some great work that Stan almost killed with unreadable writing. Um, Ditko did some great work that Stan almost killed with unreadable writing. Um, one of my biggest hot takes in comics is I'll talk about Stan as an important comics figure. I will never talk about him as a good writer.
Mhm.
Um, but on the flip side, sometimes I wish, and I understand why he didn't, because you had to turn out that number of pages to make money. One of my other hot takes in comics is as important as Kirby is, as much as he gave us the language of so many comics. Um, I only view about 1 in 5 of his books that I've read as like good, and the others I can feel that he does 6 pages a day. Does that make sense?
I think there's a I don't want to get into psychotherapy, but there's
That's
an
fair.
argument made that we have comic books today because of Stan, and his cheerleading,
Right.
but that we have comic books today because of what Jack did with Stan, the synergy that exists between the two of them.
Right.
I believe that you can trace it all back to that Herald Tribune piece, that Jack was never able to defend himself without embellishing. And in the same way that comic book fans represent an aspect of the public that needs someone to root for, Stan is the epitome of nice identifying itself as good.
Right.
And Stan was the guy who took credit for his own rescue. And
right.
Jack could never come across. Jack presumed that the obvious would support him, but it never did.
Right.
And I think that Stan's position as a company man just gave him all the power that he ever needed.
Right.
I mean, let's face it, Stan was a miserably unhappy, depressed hack.
Yes.
And then he connects with Kirby. I was in the context of this lunch yesterday, I was talking about Joe Maneely. I just picked up the Maneely Fantagraphics book, which is coming soon, and I'm a huge Joe Maneely fan. But it's clear to me that if Joe Maneely hadn't died, there may not be comics today. Because the reason we have comics today is because of the synergy that existed between Stan and Jack in the early 60s. And I don't include Ditko in this, because Ditko, as brilliant as Italian as he was still not the force of nature that Jack was.
No.
And there's an exegesis to be written about Jack Kirby's relationship with taller, better-looking German Jews, starting with Joe Simon and going on to Stan. But, since, as I said earlier, that comic books are about Jews fucking over other Jews, you can't find a better example.
Something that I think about sometimes, because it's and do you in your mind separate comic books? I mean, you've already talked about separating them somewhat from comic books, and we're going to call them, I don't want to use the word that you don't like, so we're going to call them longer comic works.
Well, I mean, years ago I had a meeting with Jonathan Bankin and George Pelecanos. Okay, George Pelecanos is a great crime writer out of the DC area, who back then it was Piranha Press at Vertigo, and we tried to convince George to do a book. I wanted to collaborate with him on a book with him. And George is one of those guys who, of his generation, never read comics. There are those anomalies, there are guys like that. And his understanding was that a graphic novel was literally a novel. And I said, it's a novella at best. Okay. And a graphic novel, I mean, right now I'm working on a 96-page adaptation of a pulp novel of the late 1970s. Is it a graphic novel or is it a big fat comic book? It's a big fat comic book, but it's got 120 pages. It's 120 some odd pages, maybe more than that. So it's big, but it's not a novel. It's an adaptation of a novel. And, I'm not talking about floppies, I'm talking about narrative. So, graphic novel is one of those phrases that was concocted to sell books and to make a certain part of the audience comfortable with reading comic books. In the same way that cinema is used to define film.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why overall I call them all comics, from comic strips to web comics to manga to
it's a different language.
Sometimes.
We talked about Eisner. Eisner. I mean, I had a personal anathema. We hated each other's guts on a personal level from the minute we met.
Okay.
But I have Eisner was the guy who basically invented modern comic books. He was the guy who took the 12-panel breakdown of a Sunday page in the newspapers and transliterated it to a different aspect ratio and created what the language of comic book narrative. Everybody was doing Eisner. When I was a Golden Age collector, I did not know about the quality books. I didn't know about the books that he edited and Jerry Iger put together. Had I known, I would have been buying those, because that's what the language was concocted. Everything Jack was doing with Joe in the 1940s. Everybody at DC, everybody at Marvel, timely, were doing what Eisner was laying down the path. And everything he did informed comic book storytelling. And it isn't until Kurtzman comes along in the early 1950s and introduces a metronomic effect, counting words, pages that are organized and very specific. And there's no sense of chaos to Kurtzman's work. Kurtzman's work is all about structure and control. And it's a work that has limited appeal to an audience that's looking for sensation. It's not about sensation. It's about narrative, the method of narrative. And when Stan and Jack come together, when Jack comes to work at Marvel, I mean, I don't know why. I mean, there are allusions to why Jack Schiff blacklisted Jack at DC. I have no idea why. I'd love to know. I forget who to ask. Do you have any idea why?
I don't, but I know some people that I could ask. So if I find out, I'll.
At any rate, when Jack becomes the workhorse that he ends up becoming for Stan, he moves into he literally puts the Eisner behind him and begins doing these 4-panel pages that eliminate action and replace action with impact.
Right.
And what most comic book writers today are trying to do is to achieve Kirby and Lee effects with Eisner storytelling. Very few of them have any understanding or interest in Kurtzman, because Kurtzman would be identified as boring by the contemporary comic book reader, because it doesn't have, because you're not, most comic book readers are arrested adolescents.
Yeah, the comic book readers are wider than Wednesday Warriors now because of the graphic novel. I mean, the best-selling comics last year weren't from DC or Marvel.
Yeah, I'm only talking to the experience I have working in.
No, I understand.
Because I'm a mainstream comic book guy.
That's true.
My work does not look like the alt stuff. It doesn't look like Dogman. It doesn't look like Mouse. It's drawn in a style and a technique that is mainstream adjacent. I'm not telling mainstream stories. I'm not telling stories about Jane Porter and Don Blake. I'm not doing Captain Marvel bullshit. But I am using the techniques and language of that material, because that's where I come from. That is right. My marketplace. That was my school. It's one of the reasons why I've often said that I'm too weird for the mainstream and too mainstream for the weird. My work looks like mainstream comic books to the alt guys who have no interest in satisfying. I mean, they have no curiosity. They have contempt prior to investigation. They simply presume. I mean, when I tell you,
some of them, yes.
I'm identified as a superhero guy by these old motherfuckers.
Yeah.
And they can all die and taste their own blood. They're ignorant mototherfuckers.
I desperately am trying to bring groups together because I mean, first of all,
don't waste your breath. Don't waste your breath.
That's the teacher in me. It's the teacher in me.
All right. I can dig that.
I was born to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to be a teacher when I was 10 years old. I floated off to other things and I came back to it. Yeah, no, again, it's that rational optimist, because you can always show, I mean, if you work hard enough at it, you can show the alt guys that brilliant piece of even superhero stuff and go, oh, wow. And half of them started on superhero stuff.
Look, when I hear Daniel Close say that he was grateful that he wasn't good enough to get work in Marvel when he was out looking for work, the contempt just literally floats on the surface like a head on a beer. Come on. The condescension with which the work they do which they greet the work that is done in mainstream is often justified, but for more often than not, it comes from a source of utter contempt prior to investigation.
See, and I own a well-loved copy of a Marv Wolfman, Gene Colan era Daredevil that used to belong to Dan Close. It's got his notes on it.
Because he was a fanboy.
Well, but I also heard him talk at CXC, and he still loves
but
It's
he
not
loves
what
it.
it's not the
He, lo-
stories that he wants to tell.
he loves it from a perspective of irony, from attraction to his lost youth. In the same way that every so often, when I'm in a grocery store, I see a twink and I say, I wonder.
I don't know.
It's like, well, I
I
mean,
think
look,
Monica
look,
had a lot of that type of storytelling in it.
I love Drew Friedman. I love his work
Okay.
so much. Okay. And Drew is another guy who has contempt for mainstream material. But he also embraces with joy his love for really shitty comedy, with no identification of the fact of how low life and shitty that comedy is in a symbiotic relationship to mainstream and shitty comic books.
Right.
So that when we allow ourselves the love of one thing that represents dross and shit at the expense of all the other stuff that's shitty and dross that other people love. Okay. I mean, I'm a lifelong a cappella and doo-wop fan. Okay.
Okay.
Doo-wop waxes and wanes in its popularity. Okay. But I still have, I mean, I'm listening to stuff that I started listening to when I was 6. Okay. And I love it. I truly do. And I recognize the fact that it's folk art in its own way. Okay?
Absolutely.
And I don't apologize for my love for it, and people look at me like I'm crazy, but I still love it. I also love girl singers of the 1930s and 40s.
As you should.
It's actually one of the ways that, I bonded with Gary, with Groff. But, we all have our weak moments of nostalgic love. And I have my own, and I have to get over my disdain for those who disdain everything but that one thing of theirs. Okay.
Well, and that's fair. I think there might be less disdain out there than you feel like there is.
I disagree.
But
I've been on the personal receiving end of this shit.
And that's where
I was at a convention in Buenos Aires some years back. Okay. And the only other mainstream guy who was going to be there opted out the day before the show started. So I found myself spending a week in Argentina in the company of these alt guys, these Art Spiegel, heads up Art Spiegelman's ass crowd. And none of them seemed to be upset by the fact that Art refused to stay at the same hotel we were at. He needed a different, more special, a limousine liberal hotel. Okay. And the condescension with which these people greeted me, the shock on their faces when they discovered that I was fluent in Spanish. Oh, what? Oh. And this happened after I was being discussed by 2 people across from me at a table in Spanish about my character. Fuck you, you shit stains. How dare you? So believe me.
And again, personal experience aside,
my experiences are personal. Okay?
Right.
I'm not interested. Wait a minute. I'm not interested in being a missionary to save these people from their own bullshit.
You shouldn't have to.
Okay.
You shouldn't have to. I'm never going to tell you to not have personal feelings about personal experiences. That's a whole different ballgame.
Look, somebody posted on Facebook whether indie comics guys should criticize each other in public. And I stopped myself before I said anything. But the fact is, I don't criticize anybody's work in public, but I certainly criticize them personally. I hate a lot of people, and I'm hated by a lot of people. But my feelings have little or nothing to do with their work and everything to do with my own.
I'm just trying desperately not to join that list, while at the same time,
you're doing fine.
Okay. Well, at the same time, maintaining my optimism and love for the medium.
That seems specious and with time wasting.
Oh, I don't know. Again, I just
come to me for tips. I'll be there for you.
That sounds good.
We're gonna have to start bringing this to a close. I've got to get pages out.
We are, and that's actually where I was taking it. I like to ask everybody, tell me a comic that you love, that you wish more people had read and could talk about with you.
Okay. Palomino by Stephen Frank. and Stray Dogs by Tony Fleeks.
Oh, I love Stray Dogs. Have you seen
Really good.
they're doing a one with cats coming up.
I haven't seen the follow up. Tony knows to get a hold of me.
Yeah, it just got announced. Palomino by who?
Stephen Frank, Franck.
Yeah.
It's a crime book that takes place in the Bakersfield, San Bernardino country western scene in North Hollywood in the 1980s.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
It's great.
That seems way up my alley.
Oh, it's fucking great. Trust me. It's
Yeah.
really
And Stray Dogs I know well. The Stray Dogs I
Palomino.
know well.
Fuck you up. It's that good.
Well, then that's definitely one of my next reads. Howard, it has been a pleasure. You are welcome back anytime. You have
Thanks.
two books coming up. You've got what, Sunshine Patriots, I know hits comic
Sunshine Patriots is
shops.
out. The trade is out. It's out there. Nobody's buying it. It's okay. It's a book that literally went right to the toilet.
Okay, it doesn't actually hit comic shops until this month.
The trade?
Yeah, Diamond
Oh,
has it coming very soon. I know that it's available through the publisher.
well, the Times Squared omnibus
Right.
will be first week in February.
Okay. So that's
Uh,
why I couldn't find the Times Squared omnibus. It's not actually out yet.
it's coming out it drops the first week in February. Second week
Okay.
in
Because that I'm
the
definitely looking forward to.
volume 3, the trade paperback of Hey Kids Comics, volume 3 is out there.
Right.
And I'm working on a successful crowdfunder that we just completed for a book called Fargo: Hell on Wheels.
Actually, it looks like Sunshine Patriots is also listed as February 14th,
Interesting. I had no idea.
at least through Diamond.
Okay,
So,
I've got my phrase already. All right. Well, bye. I expect nothing from any of you.
I like to try. I mean, you get mentioned in the stuff coming out that well, actually, it looks like it's order again, so I have no idea.
What, Times
I
Squared?
No, the Sunshine Patriots, because
Hmm.
I thought there was a collected edition, and it's not
It is.
coming up at Diamond at all right now.
I have no clue. No, I have
Yeah.
no idea. I step away from the business side of it because I'm kind of an idiot when it comes to that stuff.
But Times Squared, I am definitely, and that's I literally I was looking for this in comic shops for whatever reason. I thought the omnibus had
3
come out
years
already.
we had a legal entanglement which was creating absolute bullshit problems for us, which we could not get over.
Gotcha. I very much look forward to being able to finally read the completed version
Me
of Times
too.
Squared out February 7th.
It's a beautiful book. I mean, I've seen the one copy that exists in the United States. It's pretty lovely.
Okay. And then my other question, just because we share an affinity for Stephen Sondheim, what is your favorite Sondheim musical?
Follies.
Follies? Okay.
I've seen good productions. I've seen bad productions, but yes, it's my favorite
I
genre.
mean that tends to be the case with any.
Although I have to say that the new production of Sweeney Todd is
Yeah.
the best version of Sweeney Todd I've ever seen in my life.
Okay. Good to know.
I've seen a lot of productions of Sweeney Todd. I'm seeing Merrily We Roll Along in the spring.
Okay.
I'm going to see Sweeney Todd again in the spring. Get to see it with a new cast with Sutton Foster and Aaron Tveit. I've seen a really shitty production of Merrily We Roll Along. The last production of Follies I saw with Danny Burstein and Bernadette Peters just killed me. It's fantastic. And I've been listening to Sondheim's Old Friends for the past couple of days. I saw the Sondheim's Old Friends show in London in November.
Okay.
And my wife and I cried for 2.5 hours. We just wept. It just killed us.
So you do adaptations of fiction. Have you ever considered adapting a musical?
No.
I mean, it would be a challenge, but it could be done.
I mean, anecdotally, years and years ago, I remember everything is 10 years ago now because it's just how it happens when you get old. I was in London, passing through London on the way to Paris, and I spent the night at a hotel that I could no longer afford, but that I had stayed at for years and years ago when I was working in television. And our room wasn't ready. My wife was across the street. It was a neighborhood we know very well in London. My wife was across the street at a number of consignment stores. And I sat down in the lobby waiting for my room to be ready. I looked to my right, and Stephen Sondheim was sitting next to me. He was obviously in town working with Tim Burton
Right.
on Sweeney Todd, a terrible movie. Awful.
Yeah.
And I had a fanboy meltdown because that's what you do.
Right.
And I said to him, finally, I said, Mr. Sondheim, my name is Howard Chaykin. I'm a comic book artist of some renown. And unlike most of my colleagues who are influenced by professional wrestling, I'm deeply influenced by the American musical theater, and I hate my mother too. And I got a laugh out of him. That was the most rewarding experience of that trip. It was pretty fabulous. So, yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. No, I just asked because there's been a lot of interesting music and comics lately. P. Craig Russell did an adaptation of Carmen.
Well, no, Craig is obsessed with opera, and for me, Times Squared is a reflection. I mean, as I've said more than once, Times Squared is what would happen if Fritz Leiber, Philip K. Dick, and Frank Lesser met in a bar. And one of the great things about reading Sondheim's two collections of annotated lyrics was his validation of my identification of Frank Lesser as the greatest member of the American Popular Songbook contributors. I saw Guys and Dolls in London the day after I saw the Sondheim show, this wildly overpraised immersive production, and I saw an amateur production of it a week later in San Francisco with my grandson. And in the piece I wrote about it, about Guys and Dolls, about Frank Lesser, and about Damon Runyon,
love Damon Runyon,
confirms the fact that the text comes through. And what's great about Guys and Dolls is that Runyon's narrative is in the music, not in the book. It's in the lyric and the songs. That's where it comes through. The very fact that Lesser opens Guys and Dolls after the Runyon Land overture with Fugue for Tin Horns, which is basically the introduction of Johann Sebastian Bach into popular song, and it staggers me. It humbles me enormously. So.
Sounds fantastic. I wish I could get 2 more musicals. They're often out of my price range.
Well, Chicago's a tough theater town. I mean, they comes and goes. Yeah, I'm going to be in New York in 2 weeks. I'm seeing the Days of Wine and Roses with Brian Darcy James and Kelly O'Hara, and I'm seeing Harmony the next night, the musical about the comedian harmonists. And I'll be in again in June. At which point I'll be in April again, and then in June. In April, I'll see Sweeney Todd and maybe Merrily We Roll Along. And then in June, I'll see Merrily We Roll Along again with colleagues, and probably Sweeney Todd again. Whenever in New York, I find it easier to go to the theater in New York than I don't live in Los Angeles. I live an hour and a half from Los Angeles. It's easier to fly to New York and see a show than it is to drive and park in Los Angeles to see a show. The venues are just not there.
Yeah, no, I've got a couple of friends in LA area at this point. One of which I've never met in person. That's the weird thing about having a comics podcast. You become
I know.
Just by. So let me take us out, and I'll talk to you for a minute or two before I let you go. For Howard Chaykin, for 22 panels, we will see you after the next page.
Hey guys, this is Tyler from 22 Panels. I'm here to tell you all about our Patreon. If you enjoy this show, please consider donating to our Patreon to keep this show going. We have many different tiers, all different levels to help you decide what's right for you. Okay, so get on out there to patreon.com/22panelspodcast.